We went with the table today, huh? All right. Yeah, look, I'll just start off by really basically, what I said to the team, which was I was proud of the way that our guys continued to fight. I was proud of the way that we finished the season. But I'm pissed that we put ourselves in that position. And when you look at where we've been the last 3 years, at 9-8, 7-10, 9-8, it's not good enough. And so I think we all have to look at, and everyone in the building is part of the culpability of that. All of us, coaches, players, everybody. And so we have to look at what do we need to change. And I'm not going to go into any of those details in terms of what changes will occur, but there's things that have to be different. And so I think that's part of what we have to do this offseason as an organization. Players, coaches, front office, everybody. I think we just got to look at, what are we going to do differently? Because we're all part of the problem, and now how are we going to figure out how we can all be part of the solution? And that's really what this offseason is going to be about.
Dennis, directly, nobody gets judged by those numbers more than the head coach. What does that say about you and your performance?
Well, it hadn't been good enough. Obviously, as the head coach, the last 2 years at 7-10 and 9-8, it's not what we aspire to be here. And so I have to do a better job. And I accept that responsibility.
You went 4-1 over the last 5 games. Did you do your best coaching job? Was there something that you figured out that worked for this team?
Well, look, you can only judge things based on the product that's out there on the field, right? And so, I think you would have to say that our team was, in 4 of the 5 games to finish out the season, I think our team was ready to play, and I think our team performed well in those games.
Have you and Mickey sat down yet to talk about the future, and if so,
No.
Will that be sometime this week?
Yeah, we'll there'll be a lot of discussion that'll go on throughout the week.
How hard are those discussions, knowing you've seen glimpses of what you feel like you can be?
Yeah, look, I think anytime you get through the season, a long 18-week season, going all the way back into training camp, there's a lot to digest, and so. I think those are conversations that are always hard conversations because you really got to look at, everything, and all these things we're dealing with whether it's players, coaches, whatever the case may be. You're dealing with human beings, and certainly there's some things that Mickey's going to have for me that that he thinks that I can do better at, and so, but I think that's part of the growth process. It's part of the growth process for me as a coach. It's part of the growth process for us as as an organization, and for us as a team.
Is your expectation at this time, as you sit here, that you're back next season?
That is my expectation, yes.
And what about the last 5 games or last stretch of success that was at the end of the season kind of gives that? Are you using for momentum going into 2024?
Well, it was obviously encouraging to see. And I think in particular, this last game from an offensive perspective and the way that our offense played in this last game, it was encouraging to see. And what was encouraging to see is some of the young players that we have step up in prominent roles and make plays. Guys that are going to need to be call it core pieces of what we're trying to build here. So to see guys like I mean, the touchdown, the one touchdown on the fade route to A.T. Perry, I look out there and it's A.T. Perry, it's Rashid Shaheed, it's Chris Olave, and it's Kendre Miller, other core skill players that are on the field, at that particular time. So having some of those young guys being able to step up, I think, gives you confidence as you move forward. Go ahead, Ed.
The numbers say that your strength of wins compared to the rest of the league was not very good. That's what the numbers say. Does that affect the prism as to how you look at things in the offseason?
I guess the short answer to that is no, I'm not really looking at, a statistical analysis of what the strength of win is or strength of schedule or any of that type of stuff. I'm basing it off of the eyeball test and where we performed well and where we didn't perform well. And I would say that, overall there was encouraging signs, there were good signs, but overall it wasn't good enough.
And Ed, you mentioned that you talked to Mickey and he let you know some things that he thinks you could do better. Are there some things that you felt you could have done better this season?
I haven't really had a lot of time to really self-reflect on that. So it'd be hard for me to come up with look, there's certainly things that where I know I can improve and I can be better. And I think that's just part of what this, process is about as you get through the season. As I'm going through the season, I'm not doing a lot of reflection on, the totality of, the job I'm doing. I kind of evaluate that as the season's over and where could I have been better. So, and that'll be part of my process as we go forward.
You mentioned some young players who were encouraging in the way they played, but does this roster still need to get younger?
Well, look, I think we certainly need to still add some young pieces to our roster. I think there's a good veteran presence here. I think there's some veteran players that can still perform at a high level. But I think we also need to incorporate some more youth and talent, on our team. And so, as you do every year. And so we'll look at ways in which we can do that.
I know that we're kind of like in sports in general, like a player empowerment era, so to say. But when the players say we overrode the coach, do you think that shows a fracture between the players and the staff in some capacity?
Well, I think I've addressed that situation plenty. What I will say is this: I'll say that those players went out and played their tail off in the last 5 games of the season. And I've been on teams where that doesn't happen. And so, no, I don't believe there's any fracture.
Hey, Dennis, do you think culturally, though, you all need to make some adjustments or changes? How important is that?
Yeah, look, yeah, I do. I do think there's some things that we needed. Our mindset needs to be different. Look, I've been here for a lot of it, and we've had a lot of success around here. And I think sometimes you can kind of get a little comfortable with that. And so I just think we need to reevaluate what we need to do to win games at the level that we need to win games at. And I think that'll be a big part of what we do this offseason.
Would you consider changes of offensive staff?
Yeah, look, I think we're gonna look at everything. So I'm not gonna get into staff changes or player changes or any of that stuff. I don't think that's what today's about. But yeah, we're gonna look at everything in our organization and where do we need to improve. And so, That'll all be part of the process.
Were there
I know
moments?
You're not announcing any decisions on the offensive staff. You probably haven't made them yet, but how do you wrestle 3 years of the offense's kind of battle of inconsistency with 5 weeks of they found themselves? I mean, do you try not to overreact to it?
Well, I think that's why, you don't jump to any judgments on anything, 24 hours after the last game. I think you got to sit back. I think you got to look at the whole season in its entirety, the last few years in its entirety. Think about the direction that we want to go. Think about where we need to, where are the areas that we need to improve, and then make whatever, decisions that we need to make to give ourselves and give this organization the best chance to have success.
What areas do you think the team improved in your second year as a head coach?
Well, and improved in the one-loss record. That was one area. We took the ball away much better this season. I feel like we were more competitive in a lot of games this year. I thought we threw the ball better this year. I think we're better in the passing game this year. I don't think we ran the ball as effectively as we needed to. I think this was a more competitive team than the one we were last year. I thought our guys worked hard last year, but I think we were much improved in terms of our competitiveness this season.
What you were talking about with maybe how things have been here, or used to that, and the mindset needs to be different. Were there moments this year where, I don't know if you want to call it complacency, but you kind of realized that the mindset needed to be different as the season?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's different. I think your team reacts in different ways throughout the course of the season, and so, I think there were some times where, I felt like, man, we need to commit a little bit more to doing the things that we need to do to be able to win and be able to win the way that we think we should or think we can. And so, obviously, when you get through the season and the expectations that, not only did the people outside of our building have for this team, but the people inside this building had for the team, and I don't think we met those expectations. And so anytime you don't do that, then I think there's a lot of things you got to look at as to, what are those reasons why, and how do we change those?
Andres Pete was put at left tackle on necessity, and he represented himself pretty well for the most part. Moving forward, do you feel good where he is? Do you feel like that's a spot he could be next year?
Again, I'm not going to get into where guys are going to be at next year, and yet I think Andres came in and did perform well at the left tackle position. So I thought that was good to see, and it was needed in our situation where we were at this season. So, we'll make those decisions as we move forward.
Dennis,
Did
beyond
go ahead. Did the Green Bay game, looking back on it, change your season dramatically, you think?
Well, I think there was a stretch of games, 6 or 8 games there that after that Green Bay game that I don't think we played our best football. I thought our team started fast this year. I thought we finished strong this year. I think there was a big chunk of meat in the middle that we didn't handle that as well as we needed to. And certainly, at the time I thought, this is one that's going to come back and bite us, and certainly it did.
Beyond the feeling a little bit healthier toward the end of the season, what do you think Derek started playing as well as he did?
Look, I think there was a number of factors. I think A was health. I think B, protection. I think C, guys around him played better. And so I think that, it's obviously the ultimate team game, and it's never one person or one thing. But I thought those were the factors that led to him playing, certainly his best football for us, over the last 5 or 6 weeks. But I think some of the better football that he's played.
What did you guys figure out on the offensive line later in the season where it just became a little more consistent with the protection?
Yeah, look, I think, I think, a lot of those guys ended up getting settled into positions, and there was less moving around, although we had a few injuries where guys have had to step in and perform. I think that was part of it. I think we incorporated a little bit more play action protection, which, solided things up a little bit more for Derek and gave him a little bit cleaner pocket to throw the ball into. So I think there were some schematic things that we did, and I think there were some execution things that we did.
Does Carr's finish give you guys optimism going into the offseason for the way the offense could look next year, the way they get?
Yeah, look, I mean, again, like I said, I thought, in particular this last game, I thought it was the best that our offense looked all season long. And I thought we ran the ball effectively in this past game. We're efficient in the passing game. We made contested plays when we needed to make contested plays. We scored points in the red area like we needed to do. So, it gives you confidence moving forward. I think that's the type of performance that, I expect from our offense.
I know, kind of like following up on Jeff's culture question, I know when you got here, it was a total rebuild, so to say, 37 new players, a whole new staff. When you took
Talking
over,
about in 06.
06, yeah, when you got here, first time, sorry. But taking over this time, there was more of kind of like a drift than a massive shift, so to say. Is maybe the culture like true believers more in you and Derek than victims of nostalgia of what it was from what they remember from like a previous regime, so to say?
You got to repeat that question. I mean, there's a lot going on there. I mean, holy cow.
Hanging on to what they remember it used to be than what you are now.
Yeah. Look, I don't know that. I mean, certainly what we've done over the past 3 years, again, I'm saying it again, it hasn't been good enough. So we've really got to look at how are we going to improve. I think there's a level of commitment with everybody that we can't fall back on what we did in 17, 18, 19, 20. And if you really go back, like, there was a lot that went into that. There was a lot of hard work that went into that, and so we got to get back to the grind a little bit. That's what happened here in 06, and I think that's what happened here in 17, 18, and 19. And I think we got to get back to that. And look, we've had some of these, success, a little bit of struggle, and then get back to the success that we've become accustomed to here.
Dennis, I'm sorry this is an obvious question, but just consider the cap situation that you guys are in, and I'm assuming there's going to be just some decisions made on players this offseason, everything that always goes into that. How much input do you have on those decisions?
Well, look, I mean, I think I have a lot of input into what we do with the roster, and yet, there's a financial aspect that goes along with that. There's other people that are more qualified to handle the finances than me. But in terms of the makeup of the roster, I'm heavily involved in that.
Dennis, maybe these are two separate questions instead of lumping these two guys together, but obviously Marshawn Lattimore, he was on the sideline yesterday, and Mike Thomas, they weren't they didn't come back and play in the last 6-7 weeks or whatever. I mean, what's your viewpoint on that? Is that totally health related? Is that part of this culture conversation?
Yeah, look, I mean, as to them coming back and not being able to play, I mean, it's totally a health related question. Those guys, I do think that, based on their injury report this morning, that if if we were playing this week, there'd be a chance that Lattimore could be available. So I think that's good news. And look, I think both those guys are trying to get themselves back. So, but yeah, it was all totally health related.
Dennis, was there any point this season where you were worried about your job? Did you feel like the team needed to make the playoffs or get a winning record? Or
No. I mean, I think anytime you're in the season, like, we got enough to worry about with just getting ready for the next opponent and how we're going to get our team ready to play. And anything else that you're worried about or you're paying attention to is just a distraction that keeps you from being able to do the best job that you can do. And much like I talked about last week with control the things you control. And so I control how I come to work every day, the mindset that I bring to work every day, the amount of effort and intensity I put into it. I control how the message is to the team, and what we're doing from a schematic standpoint. Any decisions that are made outside of that are out of my control, and so I don't spend a lot of time worrying about those things. I understand that this is a production-based business. I've been in this business for a long time, and so. Yeah, so to say I worried about it, no. But I do understand it's a production-based business.
So speaking of production, point differential, I know can be a somewhat misleading stat, but yours is pretty high, actually. What is the most instructive or practical way to look at, like, what that means?
Well, look, I would say that tells me that we weren't consistent enough. That would tell me that we had some close games that we didn't make enough plays. We didn't coach them well enough in some of these close games to give ourselves a chance to win those things. And so it would tell me that there's ability there, but it would say that it wasn't as consistent as it needed to be.
Did you guys find something with the consistency, though, like that will help maybe next year, seem late in the season, that kind of got solved? Like, is that something you figured out that you can carry into next year?
Yeah, look, I do think that we played more consistent, in the last stretch of the season, and I think our record indicated that. And so, yeah, I'm not going to get into the specifics of what those things are that we figured out, but I do think there were some things that we figured out and did much better, over the last month and a half.
Is Michael Thomas's knee injury a little more serious as the rehab went on? I mean, you didn't mention him with Marshawn Lattimore. Like, how's Michael Thomas doing?
Well, he's progressing. He's not. It's not where we would have originally had hoped, but he's getting better.
When you talk about culture and commitment, how much of maybe what he tweeted at during the game was a factor in maybe letting you know that the culture needed to be different?
Yeah, I don't think that was any factor.
Yeah, when it comes to Trevor, obviously first round pick, can't get on the field in year 2. How much urgency is there in regards to that?
I think there's a big urgency in terms of us and in terms of him of needing to develop that player. I think we need to develop that player. We drafted him for a reason. I think he has talent, and that's a guy that we need to get the best we can out of him.
See somebody who
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, you know. But I do think that's a player that you know, we need to develop.
What's your philosophy on developing that player, though, if y'all don't trust him enough to get on the field in situations, you know, like last night when the team was up a lot and kind of switching personnel?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yet, my focus at that point in time is not how am I developing for the future. My focus on that is, you know, I want to win this game. And, you know, it kind of got a little late before the game really got out of hand. I mean, obviously they drove the ball down there. I think it was a 2-score game, may have been a 3-score game at that time when they got the ball down there on the 2, and we ended up with the, you know, the 4th down stop. But it wasn't probably till after that drive that, you know, the game kind of got out of hand. So, but yeah, I mean, for a guy to develop, you know, I think playing's an important part of it.
And then on the flip side, you guys kind of stuck with Blake Grouping through the highs and lows of this year. Are you happy with the end results of that patience?
Yeah, look, I saw improvement. Really, both of our, you know, the kicker and the punter, I thought improved as the season went on. So yeah, I mean, I think that was, you know, I think that was the right thing to do, and I've seen it so many times with young kickers that struggle and then go on and have really, really productive careers. And so yeah, I was pleased that we, you know, stuck with him.
And Dennis, we didn't see Jimmy in the locker room, but he had a tweet this morning that kind of seemed like he might be shutting it down. Has he given you all that indication?
We haven't discussed that, no. So I'm not on Twitter either, so.
No, Dennis, I wanted to ask you about offensive kind of system, if you will. I mean, do you have any strong thoughts about not the staff, but just the way you all conduct offense, and would you consider maybe some new ideas there and modernizing it a little bit? How do you want to put it?
Yeah, I think we're always considering new ideas. And I would say, you know, there was, from a system standpoint and schematically and some of the things that we did, there's a lot of it that works. And certainly I think there's some things that we can do better. But I still believe there's a lot of those things that work in our league, and I think a lot of the stuff that we did on offense this year, it proves that it can be successful. And yet, I do think there's some things that we need to improve on.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, is it a fine line there between keep doing what you're doing because it's working, but also maybe bringing in some fresh ideas to maybe balance that out?
Yeah, look, I think those are all good questions. I think those are all things that, you know, we're going to talk about over the next few days to, you know, really iron out the direction that we want to go and how we want to, you know, continue to move forward. But I do think there's, you know, some things that, you know, have proven to work in our league that we do offensively, and I think we want to be able to keep some of those things. And then I think, you know, we got to look at how we can maybe do some things differently.
I know you answer our questions and talk about what you told the team. We may not speak to you again for a few months with the offseason starting.
Dang it.
And it may be kind of corny, and I know you're not running for office, but do you have like a message for the fans who are frustrated because they love the team so much?
Man, that's a great question. Yeah, I think my message would be that I appreciate the fans that we have, because I do think we have some of the best fans in all of pro sports. And I do think there's a connection between our fans and this city. And I would say, much like the New Orleans Saints have done over the past, call it 20 years, 15 years. We've battled through some hard times, and we've come out on the other side of the storm. And I fully expect us to come out on the other side of the storm again.
With the success in the sort of latter part of the season with Zach Vaughn, sort of as this smaller but speedier edge rusher, does that impact at all the typical prototype that y'all look at?
I don't know that that necessarily impacts the prototype that we're looking for. I do think that there's something to, you know, a little bit of a changeup and a little bit of a fastball. And I do think that he added some of that to our pass rush this year, you know. So, but I don't think that that changes. You know, these prototypes that we have led to a lot of success around here for a long time, and so it's been successful, and so I don't see us moving too far away from that. Go ahead, Ed.
Coach, what is your perception about how close or how far you are away, or do you have one?
Well, look, I think we're closer than. I think we're close. That's what I'll say. I think we're close. Now, as my dad used to always tell me, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. Like, we need to do it. And so, but I do, look, I think there was improvement from this season, from last season to this season, you know, and you don't get to just pick up where you left off. You know, you start everything anew. But I do think that we're progressing in the right way.
Do you feel that way about your defense, though, or do you feel like the defense actually took a little step back?
Yeah, I would say we weren't as dominant this year as some previous years. I would still say ultimately this game's about points allowed. And I would say we were still one of the better defenses in our league in terms of allowing offensive points. I don't think we stopped the run as well as we needed to this year, and I think we gave up way too many explosive plays. And I think those are two areas that we have to improve on.
Then as the public faces of the team are always going to get a lot of criticism, do you feel like the amount of criticism that you got or Derek got was fair in relation to how the team performed this year?
Well, I'm going to speak on like, no, I don't think it was fair that what the amount of criticism that Derek Carr got. You know, he's one element of 11 guys that are out there on the field. And I don't think anybody, you know, ever really fully understands what goes on inside an NFL building and what needs to happen to have success. So I thought Derek Carr played well this year. And I thought in particular over the stretch run, when we had to have it to give ourselves a chance, I thought he played some of his best football. So I'm excited about Derek being our quarterback moving forward for sure.
Do you feel the same way about yourself?
I don't even pay attention to that.
I have kind of a lighthearted question. I referenced victim of nostalgia, and I'm going to reference Sean Payton. I remember a couple of years ago after the season ended, we asked him how he decompressed or got away, and he said he watches Netflix and eats ice cream and stuff like that. What do you do to get away? Do you take a week off? Do you go spend time with family? How do you unplug?
Yeah, look, yeah, well, there won't be a lot of unplugging right now. You know, I think the season's over, and now we got to get ready for next year. But yeah, like, how do I unplug? I go home and spend a lot of time with my family. So that's what I do in the off season.
Yeah, in terms of the cultural shift that you had referenced earlier, Derek was sort of this beacon of positivity throughout the season. Anytime that he was speaking with us, we felt that from Tyron as well. Looking at some of the guys that you Max Garcia, Cameron Irving, they all kind of have this very positive piece to them that's very much in the forefront. Is that a big piece of what you're looking for in terms of that cultural shift?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, I mean, the easy part is to always point out the negatives and the flaws. I think that's kind of what we do as a society. I think everybody's really focuses way too much on the negative. I think, and yet positivity only goes so far. There has to be action that goes along with that positivity that creates the results that you're looking for. You know, and so, and I think that's what I meant when I said, you know, like all of the reason why we've had the record that we've had over the last 3 years, like all of us are involved in that. All of us are part of that problem, right? Now the positivity is how do we find the solutions, you know? And so I think that's where we're at now.
Is that a tough thing for you to balance, you know, just coaching? Because, I mean, you obviously want to point out what's negative because you want to improve it. So is there a challenge in sort of balancing that?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's always that balance between the positive and the negative. I mean, certainly the negatives are the things that keep you from being able to have the success that you want to have. And yet, if you just dwell on that, then you're going to continue to get the negative. So it's really about the positive is how do we go about fixing it? And here's the encouraging thing is when you look at these things, and if we continue to do this, we have a chance to be successful. So that's where the positivity comes in. Go ahead, Ed.
At times, you were extremely aggressive this year. How much, looking back on that?
In what way?
Well, like on a couple of calls,
yeah,
like in games.
Yeah.
How much will you revisit that, or do you think that needs to be revisited at all?
In terms of the aggression of going forward or whatever, you know, those types of decisions. Yeah, I think, look, I think that's something that we'll continue to evaluate. There were some games where, you know, we were much more aggressive. Some games we were a little bit more conservative, you know. Look, you guys talked about the Green Bay game. I go back to the Green Bay game, and if I could do it all over again, I'd have Groupie kick that, whatever it was, 56-yard field goal, you know. In a 17-0 game, chose to punt it, try to pin them back there. They hadn't been able to, you know, move the ball extremely effectively, you know, throughout the game at that point in time. And, you know, yeah, that's a lesson I learned. Like, let's go play to freaking win it, you know, and I think we could have done it in that situation. So, yes, there's things that we, you know, and I evaluate on where I can be better. Well, yeah, I got more aggressive in certain situations.
Cam Jordan, you've coached a long time. What's the fairest way to put his season in perspective?
Well, I think it's a hard thing to evaluate because, you know, when you really look at since the first Atlanta game, you know, he really wasn't himself probably until this last Atlanta game. I think Cam's at a point right now where he's still a very, very good run player. I think we got to look at how do we increase his productivity from a pass rush standpoint, you know. And so I think that'll be how do we get more production out of him as a rusher, the finish on the quarterback, those types of things. I think that's what we'll look at. How can we help him improve in that area as we go forward?
You talked about finding solutions. Given the fact that you won 2 more games this year, presumably you found some solutions from the end of last season. Can you cite some examples where y'all identified shortcomings and improved on them?
Yeah, look, I mean, it'd be hard for me to say specific examples of where that's occurred. I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that I have, you know, exactly what that answer is. I thought we executed better at times this year, and so I think that leads to, performing better. I thought I was better in certain areas, and still think I could have improved in certain areas. I think I got to do a better job of getting the defense ready to go from the beginning of the game. I think that's an area that we've got to look to, continue to improve. I think we got to look to how can we finish better, really on both sides of the ball. So those are areas that we'll look to improve. And there was times that we did that, and times that we didn't.
Would quarterback fit into that to an improvement at all? I mean, with all the money for Carr, and like did bringing Carr kind of lead to that improvement too? You think?
Yeah, I think that was part. I think that was part of it. I think, certainly. Look, we went out and got Derek Carr because we felt like he was a good fit for our organization, for our team, and I believe that he was, and I believe that he is, and I believe that the more that he gets an opportunity to work with a lot of these young skill players, the more that we're going to improve, from an offensive standpoint. So yeah, I do think he was a big factor.
Just looking back around to the Zach Bond, and like those last 2 years between him and Caden, it seems like out of necessity you kind of ended up with a situational pass rusher. You can also play Sam linebacker, also contribute on special teams. Obviously the prototype for a defensive end doesn't change, but that role kind of become a consistent thing considering how it's worked.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's interesting because that position of Sam linebacker has kind of taken on a lot of different, it's changed over the course of the years, and some years it's guys got more pass rush ability. Some years it's more of just an on the line, set an edge. Some years it's a placeholder. Like that position has changed. Some years it's been Von Miller and Khalil Mack. So I think there's a lot of guys that, you can fill that role with in a lot of different areas. And, I think in a perfect world scenario, you would like for your, Sam linebacker to bring value in other areas other than just, being a into the line of scrimmage, linebacker, whether that guy's got the ability to stack back off the ball like we had when we had Scott Fujita, whether that guy's got the ability to rush the passer. We've had a little bit of that, with Caden and Zach, and certainly some of the guys I've had in the past.
Any reaction to Arthur Smith being fired?
No, look, I think this is always a tough day in this profession, so I think, the reaction is that I know that, when guys get let go, they have families. They got kids. You know what I mean? So, yeah, you never want to see anybody lose their job.
How would you evaluate Alvin Kamara's season?
Well, look, I would say, and this isn't just Alvin, I would say that I don't think we ran the ball as effectively as we need to be able to run the ball to be the type of offense that we need to be. And I would say that Alvin, I thought, ran the ball physically this year. Like, I thought he ran the ball tough. And so, we didn't have quite the explosive plays that we're used to seeing him in terms of the run game. But I thought he was highly effective as a pass receiver. So I thought he had a productive season. And I still think there's more to be had.
How do you look at that at judging whether maybe he, I don't want to say lost a step, but wasn't where he needed to be versus the offensive line could be better and he'll get back to that explosiveness next season? Like,
yeah, I think I think you saw when there was space that he still has, some of that same explosiveness. I think all of us, you said lose a step. I don't know what that term is, but, I mean, you guys get out of bed in the morning. I mean, you don't move quite as well as you did 15 years ago. So, I mean, yeah, I think as you get old, and look, in particular at that position, running back position's a tough position. But I think he's still got plenty of ability to help us win. All right. Thanks, guys.